We'll start 4 lines from the bottom, on page base. Kuli, yeah, v'chol zeh. V'chol zeh hu al yidei ha-shefer. All of the above that we described, what is to be accomplished on Rosh Hashana. Briefly, Rosh Hashana is a complete rejuvenation, complete recreation of that which transpired in the beginning, the very first day of creation. What? I got the copy. Sure. Yeah, go ahead. It's hard to make it go. I want to take something. And he explained that this rejuvenation, this recreation, is a very deep aspect, because in the first day, when God first created the world, Hashem first created the world, the the will, the desire to create the world, there was nothing external that would solicit it. Therefore, where then did it come from? It came from the essence, from God Himself, which is saying, just as when you have when a human being does something that is completely original, there's nothing external that elicits it. Why would he do it? What brings him to do it? It is clearly something that is inherently true within him. And that's why he would do it unsolicited. If we say that God created the world, and the rotzing, the melucha, the rotzing, the will to create the world, was entirely originated with God, that means that this is something which is actually reflective of the essence of God. Because there was nothing else to respond to. When someone asks you a question, you may not be interested in the question, but since he asked you, you'll give him an answer. The fact that you give him an answer doesn't mean that you are personally interested in that topic. But if you go and do research on the topic on your own, then that's indicative of the fact that this is something which is inherent, which is deep in your own thinking, your own mind, your own psyche, if you wish, that this Indian is significant. And this is why you would go and do research in it without any external solicitations. So when the creation happened without any external solicitation, that is indicative of how deep this Indian is rooted in Hashem. If we say that Rosh Hashana is the beginning of the creation, Zikaron L'Yom Rishon, which means it reflects the same meaning that happened in Yom Rishon, the first day. That means that Rosh Hashana, it reaches back into the very essence of Hashem. And Hashem, again, wants to create the world as if it is entirely originated with Him. Although now on Rosh Hashanah there is solicitation, so to speak, because of our avodah, because we do the mitzvahs, we do a shofar. But it's indicative how deep shofar reaches. That the mitzvah of shofar is such that it reaches all the way to the essence. And this is where the rejuvenation of creation comes. So all this comes on the shofar. All that happens on Rosh Hashana. U'kamaimer, and as Chazal say, the Gemara says, 4 lines from the bottom. Imru lefonai malchiyos, Hashem tells the Eden, he should say before me malchiyos, meaning the psukim of malchiyos, kedei shetamlichuni aleichem, so that you will coronate me and make me king over you. And then it says zichronos, you should say zichronos for me. These are things that Hashem is asking us that we should say, and thereby we coronate Hashem, we make Hashem be willing again to become king on the world. And then ultimately the Gemara says, Uvameh b'shofar. What ultimately accomplishes it all, we say malchiyos, but not just the words of malchiyos. We say malchiyos and we blow the shofar. We say zichronos and we blow the shofar. And we say shofar and we blow the shofar. The actual accomplishment, the actual effect is the shofar itself. Which means shalidei hatzako bekoil poshut, the shofar. That by means of this tzako bekoil poshut, we defined earlier that shofar represents a tzako bekoil poshut, meaning a scream that has no color, has no definitions. It's just a simple scream, a koil poshut, a simple sound. The shofar that is represented by the shofar. Me'um kodelibo. This cycle, because poshet, which we already explained before, that when somebody screams in a simple scream without words, without any expression, that means that this scream comes from the depths of his heart, to the point where he cannot really identify what it is that hurts him, what it is that makes him scream. And by this deep expression, Ma'oirim, we are capable, and we arouse, we touch, umamshichim, and then draw down and elicit bechinas horotzin limluch. The rotzin limluch, Hashem's will to be for meluch. In simple terms, it means that when we scream to Hashem and we say, we want you to be king, Hashem responds, okay, I'll be king. But this scream, we want you to be king, is a scream deeper than that which we express, we want you to be king. Because we say we want you to be king because you take care of us, because you watch the peace in the country, in whatever benefits we have from your reign, from your kingship. Then it would not be a scream. There would be, we could enumerate the benefits we get from your being our ruler. Just like Lahavdil, we have the presidents on all the campaigns. Each one is saying how he is going to benefit the country. So then you vote for him not because it's cycle, because you want him. You want the benefit that you get from him. So therefore you're not talking about the individual, you're talking about the qualities that he brings along and what his policies are going to be allowed. But here we're saying it's a cycle b'kel poshut. Cycle b'kel poshut means that why do we want Hashem to be king? For no other reason but that we want Hashem himself. Not because of any definable reason, benefit. That's expressed by Yitzhak Bekoy Poshet. Therefore, shofar represents the simplest and the deepest connection that Eden have with Hashem. That they, by simple solicitation, by simple screaming out, that's what we want, Hashem responds in kind. Therefore, we are completely perplexed with this question. How would the Chazal, how did the Chachomim, mevatel this mitzvah b'Rosh Hashana shechal b'Shabbos. And Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos.
What is it? Rosh
Rosh Hashanah that comes out on Shabbos.
There's no shofar.
Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos there's no shofar. And that's the question. How the Chazal had a reason to prevent us from to preclude it. But what kind of reason can there be that would justify elimination of such an inyan? It's a very, very great thing. And then on top of it, we have a second question. If we're skipping over Shofar on Shabbos, but Rosh Hashanah still has to accomplish the same thing. How is that accomplished now without Shofar? Because I'll say Shofar is what accomplishes it. Although the psuke shofar is oimrim gam b'Rosh Hashanah shechal b'Shabbos, even though it is true that the psukim that talk about shofar, we say even on Rosh Hashanah and Shabbos, we don't blow shofar, but we mention the psukim from the Torah about shofar. But still, that doesn't answer our question, because harei hamitz with the shofar. The mitzvah of shofar, the very basic mitzvah in the Torah. And then also the avodah that it signifies, that it brings along. The bechinas tzakop nimis, that it represents the tzakop nimis, the deep scream out, zehu b'tkiyah shofar davka. That applies to tkiyah shofar, the actual blowing of the shofar, not to learn and read about shofar. And therefore, we're missing that principle. To understand this inyan and to find some kind of an explanation for this difficult question. Tzorich lohavin, I guess. Must be misprinted. Tzorich lohavin, we need to understand. Masha omru razal, what the Chazal say, imru lefonai malchi yois kedesha tamlichuni aleichem. And we mentioned before that Hashem says, you should say before me the malchios, the psukim of malchios, so that you will coronate me over you. On zichroinois, and you should say the psukim of zichroinois, so that your memory will rise up to me, so I should look favorably on you. And this is accomplished through shofar. That's what the Chazal say. Now we need to understand. The word zikorin means to remember. Where does the term remembering apply? It's implying nizkar al dover, is like as one remembers something, shaloi olo al daitoi adat, something that he remembers that slipped his mind. He lost it from his conscious memory, and now he remembers something that he had seen or heard before. How is this possible? How is this applicable to Maila? To say that Hashem didn't think of us, and now He remembers that we exist. Where is this possible? Okay, so this question, how is it possible to say that Hashem has to all of a sudden remember us? It has two implications, and he's going to explain the most important thing. Because the first thing we think of, Hashem always knows everything. He has to remember. This is a simple and superficial meaning of this question, but he explains a much deeper meaning. The ve'ato mechaye eskulo. Because in fact, the Pasuk says, ve'ato mechaye eskulo. You, Hashem, gives chayes as kulam to all that exists. Which means Shemachaya kol berio, Hashem gives life to every creature. B'chol rega, every instant, me'ayin leyesh, and brings it forth from ayin into yesh. This is a basic principle that he explains in Tanya, that since all existence does not have a basis, its own basis for existence, it exists only because Hashem wants it to exist. So therefore this want and this activity necessary, godly activity necessary to make it exist, has to be constant because it doesn't have its own basis for existence. This is very simply illustrated. I'll try to give some mishalim, but this is very simply illustrated. If you hold an article, if you hold the siddur up, and the siddur is now stationary in the air, is the siddur really stationary in the air? Does it have any basis of being in the air? Not at all. And therefore, if you see it still in the air, it's because the very force that lifted it up is still holding it up. Because by looking at the siddur in the air, no matter the fact that you see it, but if you don't see the hand holding it, you will always, no matter how long you will see it, you will always ask the question, what's holding the siddur up? You'll never convince yourself, since I don't see anything holding it up, then somehow it belongs there. It has to be this way. There's no way. There's no basis for it, and therefore you always have the question, no matter how long you observe it, what's holding the siddur up? So, the siddur, this book, yeah. So similarly, Atam Achaya School, the Rebbe created all kind of, the whole creation, and the creation is mamash existent, but their existence, the fact that they exist, does not justify that they should exist. It only tells us a fact they are there. It doesn't say since they are there, therefore they continue to be there. That doesn't hold true. If they continue to be there, is because the force that created them in the first place continues to hold them up in their existence. Every instant from nothingness, in other words, from a state of non-existence into a state of yesh. And he knows and he supervises, he watches over all the creatures. From the horns of the Reyemim, from the biggest creature to the smallest crawling entity. And so forth. And if chas v'sholem, these creatures would not be on his mind, then they would not have any means, any basis for sustenance. They would just not be there. Because being there is an indication that Hashem thinks of you. Even though this is not the principle we're learning now, but I'd like to bring in a little bit insight into this. The better we understand every line, the better we understand the next line. And one of the important reasons that I want to discuss it briefly is due to a possibility of misconception. Hashem, everybody agrees and everybody recognizes, is very great. And he is all capable. No question about it. Nothing is limit, there's no limit. We have a a sense, we have an analogy of Ein Sof. What is an analogy of Ein Sof? Open space. Open space, also we know no limit to space. When we look into space, we say we look into nothingness, into emptiness, into unlimited presence. But open space, this unlimited presence, only provides, even the Gashmias, it provides a place where you can fill, or you can put things down, that you can fill and build in. It does not provide the building that you put up there. That's like a person if one has a lot, has a piece of land. So now he's got the place where he can put up the building. Is the presence of the lot going to create a building on its own? It's not going to happen. So the union that Hashem creates everything is not merely that Hashem allows everything to be, because He has room for, like it said, He has room for everybody. But actually, He actually intentionally and specifically creates everything. And this is the pshat, that He has to be conscious of everything's existence. Nothing, quote unquote, evolves on its own. There's no such thing. If there is what we observe, such a thing as evolution, it is because Hashem wants it that way, that things should evolve in a logical fashion. The Gemara says there are certain things that are natural results of environment. There was somebody who was testing Hillel, who was asking him all kinds of wild questions. Why some people have thick legs, blown up legs? Why some people have narrow eyes? And Hillel was explaining to him, because they live in a place where the sun shines very brightly, and they try to keep the sunlight out. And they live in a place where where there's a lot of swamp in the area and liquid, and therefore their feet blow up. So this is like a natural phenomenon. But this natural phenomenon itself, that Hashem wanted that things should reflect in a logical fashion, and that's how Hashem creates it. It's not happening on its own just because it's a natural result of a circumstance. So that's what he says. Lo hoya lehem kiyum v'chayus klal. They would not have a presence, a kiyum, an existence, or a life at all. Sometimes we'll define these two terms, kiyum v'chayus, in Hashem. Elo yoideya eskulo. Therefore, we must say that yoideya eskulam, He knows all of them, umashgiach aleim. And He is mashgiach, and He watches over them and He supervises them. This means that Hashem specifically knows every creature individually. Because were it not for this specific knowledge, that creature would not have its specific existence. Va'afilu bivchinas hashgocha dedas elyoin. Even if we speak of a level of hashgocha, of a level of supervision, called the supervision of das elyoin. Das elyoin means the higher mode of das, the higher mode of knowledge. There is das elyoin and das tachtoin. Alter Rebbe in Tanya briefly speaks about this. So, Das Elyoin is a different mode, as we're going to discuss in a minute. She'einoi bibchinas hislapshus, which is not in the form of hislapshus, ki'im bibchinas makif, but rather in a form of makif. Let me explain briefly what this is referring to. If you touch the table, you know there is a table. If you look at the table, you know there is a table. What is the difference between these two modes of knowledge? In both cases, you know that it exists. It's there.
You can feel the existence.
Right, you feel the existence. Excuse me?
That will be the difference, to feel the existence, to be part of that. If you touch it, you're part of that. If you just look at that, it's like you look at everything, you're not involved. Once you touch it, you're part of that.
Right, that's correct. The question is, how can you know something without being involved with it? If you touch it, so you're touching it. It's affecting you. You feel it in your hand. So therefore, you know it's there. Something that you're not involved in, and it doesn't affect you. So what does it mean that you know it? And yet we know that, yes, there is such a thing, such a knowledge. You just observe something, and like you said, you know it without you being affected by it.
We have things that relative to that.
Excuse me?
We have things that will be relative to that. We have proofs, we have books, we have history. All the things that we believe. We have the belief we know.
No, I understand where you're going. I'm just asking a very simple question. You're talking about a very simple thing. You know the table. You can know the table by touching, and you know the table by looking at it. And as you correctly said, by looking at it, you're not involved. By touching it, you are involved. And so what type of knowledge is it? If you're not involved, and it doesn't affect you, what does it mean that you know it? So, this is an analogy on the union of Das Elyon and Das Tachton. Das Tachton means that you know something by being directly involved in it, by being directly affected. The real reason, how is it that we know something without being involved? By just observation. We are in a certain sense involved, but we're involved at a different level. What level are we involved in? We're involved in a makif level. What does this mean? Makif means surrounding. It means the following. If in our mind we thought, let me give you an illustration. This is something which actually happened when people first observed the horseless carriage. You know what a horseless carriage is?
The car?
Horseless carriage was the locomotive, the original locomotive. It's called the horseless carriage. Why did it call the horseless carriage?
After the horse?
What?
The only thing they had to
Because in their orientation, movement depended on the horse. If it doesn't have a horse, it cannot move. So when you say something that moves without a horse, you have to say it moves without a horse. Because that's how you can relate to movement. Because through a horse, the fact that the only movement that you know is horse. So as a matter of fact, when people first observed the horseless carriage, there was a whole debate going on throughout the whole world. There has to be a little horse hidden someplace. How else is it moving? In other words, if you do not have the capacity to relate to a certain phenomenon, you cannot see it. You see it move and you can't believe that it's moving. If you convince me that it moves, then it has to have a horse inside. In other words, taking this on a broader scale, that if you know something b'bchinas maki without being personally involved, that means that you have an overall recognition that such a thing is possible. And therefore, when you observe it, you can relate to it. If you have no such recognition, then you can look at it and not see it. This is when you know something b'chinas makif. When you know something b'mislapshus, mislapshus is a totally different thing. Mislapshus means that you go down to the very essence. For instance, if the same person with the horseless carriage who was perplexed about the horseless carriage, if they opened up the engine and they showed him exactly how it worked, he would not be perplexed anymore. You see there's steam, and the steam lifts and pushes the gears, and everything moves, and it's no longer a mystery. That's meant behislapshus. You're not taking the concept, but you get down to the details of what is there. Behislapshus, like I said, when you feel the table, you know it's there.
How do either of these two terms apply by the Eibishter?
Okay, I'm coming to it. So, das ist the pshat, there is Slapshus, and there is B'chinas Makif. So, B'chinas Makif means what? Coming back now in our higher level. B'chinas Makif means that you do not have to touch the object. You do not have to get personally involved in the object. But by having in your mind the place, the recognition that such an object is possible, that already allows the subject to enter your mind, even though the object itself is not there. B'chinas makif. What is Das Elyon? This explains Das Elyon and Das Tacht. Very briefly, I'm sure you learned it in Tanya, but I just want to bring me very briefly. The difference between Das Elyon and Das Tachten, as Tanya explains, is Das Elyon means that you only see Elokus. And everything that exists only because Elokus exists. But what is the real thing? What is the basis? What is the real thing? The real thing is only Elokus. Huh? Elokus is the Pshitus. What is Das Tachten? Das Tachten says, no, there is a whole world, but the world gets its highest from Elokus and is bottled to Elokus. That means that in Das Tachten you recognize first and foremost, primarily you recognize the presence of the world. Then you ask, where does the world get its highest from? And you answer, it gets from Elokus. On the Das Elyon, there is only a cognizance of the presence of Elokus. When you see things, the things are representative of Elokus. Everything in the world represents Elokus. There is Chesed and Gvura. Everything in the world represents Elokus in one way or the other. And that's how you see it. Das Elyon. Das Elyon, you don't have to say that the world is bottled to Elokus. There is no separate Metzias. Everything is automatically representing Elokus. So when you see the world from that perspective of Das Elyon, okay, let's take this also in the Moshel and develop it in the way in Moshel that I explained about sight. the person who envisioned the original locomotive, who had the idea, oh, maybe this can be made to work. He had this whole plan and the whole idea in his mind. And in his mind, this was real. He figured out how it can be made to work, that there should be a vehicle moving without a horse. Finished. And his mind is complete. When it is in his mind, is the horseless carriage in existence? Is it a separate thing from his mind? It's not a separate thing from it's because he has the concept that there's such thing as possible. The possibility itself makes it big. It's not an entity unto itself. So therefore, this is called bechinas makif. He's not mislabish. He doesn't go out of himself and touch something external. It is all part of his genius mind, and this is where it's contained. And it's real. Because as a matter of fact, from this concept, eventually was actually formulated an actual entity, an actual metzius. So therefore, this is what the Rebbe is saying. Even though that we are talking about Hashgocha the Das Elyon, Hashgocha the Das Elyon means that Hashem knows everything not because it exists, and Hashem tests, oh, it exists, okay, oh, here it is. Everything exists because everything exists in Hashem and Elokus, not as an external thing. So therefore, this is not a really stepping out of himself to know something external. Therefore, it is not in the form of hislapshus that he actually goes out and touches the object. He knows it only in a makivdike way. A makivdike way means just by allowing, by saying this is possible, this is what makes it exist. So therefore one would question and say that, be asking the question, what does it mean that Hashem has to be reminded? Because Hashem has to know everything, because this knowledge has make it exist. So we will answer that the knowledge that we are referring, that Hashem, that we're referring to over here is a knowledge with Das Elyon, and therefore it's not a real knowledge. And that's what the Rebbe is forewarning. He says, no, that's an error. Mikol mokem harei ze idea. That too is called idea.
You would think
that too is called, just one second. That too is called idea, which means that when Hashem knows things with Das Elyon, which means He knows it because they're in Hashem, not because they were created and because they're an entity for themselves, but as part of Elokus. That too is called idea. And therefore, this idea is a conscious idea, and it doesn't need to be reminded. This idea is also canceling God, the need to be reminded of it. Yeah, what was your question?
I didn't follow that last piece. So that why? What is it about the Das Elyon that you would think that there might need to be reminded of that?
Well, we are saying, what does it mean that Hashem needs to be reminded? Hashem creates everything, and this creation requires His constant knowledge of everything. Mm-hmm. So therefore, He doesn't need to be reminded. Mm-hmm. So that's what He says. Idea is on two levels, but even the higher level of idea, what's called Das Elyon, also is a real idea, and therefore it cancels out the need to be reminded. Even though it's not an idea in the same way as you're touching something external, hislapshus, because this idea is all coming from Imaila, from its level of possibility, from Elokus. Nevertheless, that also is idea. This is similar. If you take the if we take the analogy that we used, that the original design that formulated in this mechanic's mind of putting together a horseless carriage also went through many gyrations. Until such time that it became a finalized plan, and then the finalized plan also was dependent on his insight and his understanding that such a thing is possible, and it was all in his mind. So at the time when it became a finalized plan, this is already a knowledge of an object before it became a finalized plan. How does such a thing develop? Even in a person. Two people see a horse pulling a carriage. They both see the same thing. This one sees a horse pulling a carriage, this one sees a horse pulling a carriage. One sees the horse and the carriage as one entity. The horse is pulling the carriage, that's what happens over here. The carriage moves because the horse moves. Another person who is more analytical, he sees two separate things. He sees the carriage move, and he sees the horse as the energy that makes it move. So therefore, his whole approach to this observation is that there are two separate things. They're not one entity. They can be separated. Now, once I have a carriage without a horse, I have to figure out how I can substitute for the horse with something else. You follow this idea? This means that in this level of analysis, the engine to be able to move the carriage was already created in his mind at the moment when he realized that the horse and the carriage are two separate things. Anybody with me here? And then he started figuring and designing it. What can we do? How can it be done? But at that time, when he first conceptualized that the horse and the carriage are two separate things, there was no engine. There wasn't even an engine at the level of possibility. Nothing, there was no design at all. But he started dreaming, maybe I can separate the horse from the carriage and make the carriage move without a horse. At that time, there wasn't even any idea of the engine.
Why?
There wasn't.
How?
If he's saying he's separating the horse from the carriage, there has to be something moving the carriage without the horse.
That's right. Now as he realized that there are two separate entities, the horse and the carriage. Once he definitely identified two separate entities, so he knows they can be separated. And now I have to find the solution how to make the carriage move. In other words, the movement and the movement of the carriage and the horse that moves it are not one and the same thing. If I can substitute the movement by something else, I can make the carriage move without a horse. At that moment, when he realized that the horse and the carriage can be separated, that moment, the nucleus of the idea of making it move otherwise and then through a horse has begun to germinate in his mind. There is do you follow the analogy? At that point, there was no engine. There was nothing there. There was nothing there. He didn't have even an idea at the possibility level.
But we said that in order to have the idea, you have to see it, to know that it's existing somewhere some way of existing, because it's an original idea, right?
The original idea.
It's where it came from. I mean,
The original
did you
idea.
saw anything like it, or
The original idea, if we can project the union, and for the purposes of what we're trying to understand here, the original idea was born by him when he was able to separate conceptually between these two entities. I said the simpleton doesn't know that these are two separate entities. The horse and the carriage were born at the same time. This is how they were created. But he recognizes, no, they're two separate entities. The horse is only a solution to the problem of moving the carriage. Once you recognize that, then an idea begins to germinate. Now there is something to think about. I don't have any thoughts about it. I don't have any idea. But there's something to think about. Yeah, there's something to think about. By someone who is not at his level, there's nothing to think about. I mean, this is one entity. But at that point, even he doesn't. This is not called Yidiyah, because the idea has not been created yet. But there is something to think about. And because he had this creative mind, whatever it is, this is how he approached this. So he is thinking about something, but it's not called Yidiyah. But when we say that this is Yidiyah, even Yidiyah b'derech makiv, Yidiyah the das elyon, in other words, he already has an idea in his mind how to do it. And it's all because of his creativity. But that's already called Yidiyah. He has already a specific idea of what to do. So therefore, this inyan already exists in his mind. Prior to that, it didn't exist in his mind. As such. This is what the Rebbe is saying. That idea of a das elyon is not b'bchinas islapshus. It's only b'bchinas makiv. But harei is a idea. But this is real idea. This is not an idea which is devoid of that which is being known. It is an idea that knows the inyan directly. Not b'hislapshus, but he knows the inyan because of the truth of the inyan. U'kamaimer. U'kamaimer, as the saying in the Gemara is, Golui v'yodua. Golui v'yodua is an expression in the Gemara. And the expression is, etc. Golui v'yodua lifnei mi she'omer v'hoya ha'ilo. It is revealed and known to the one who said and the world came into being. I've mentioned the Gemara many times. So this Golui v'yodua is discussed in Chassidus very broadly. And what is the difference between Golui and Yodua? Golui means it is revealed, which means nothing is concealed from him. And then there is also Yodua, and it is known. What is the difference? When you say something is revealed Golui, it could be something is Golui. For instance, something that is not concealed from you, but you didn't necessarily notice it. It's also revealed. But you never noticed it. So you don't really know it. If you had only noticed what is in front of you, then you would see it. See, it doesn't have to be concealed. And Yodua means that you pay attention, you recognize it. You know it. One second. Okay, that's what. So Yodua means it is known. So the expression Golui v'yodua, because of our so to speak, limit of how we can express things, because we can express better. I'm answering your question. We can express things only within the realm of our own experience. Like we say, Belev Yam, in the heart of the Yam. Does the Yam have a heart? Why do we say Belev Yam? because the heart is the center of our existence. So we say the center of something, we say belev. And this is used all over. This is, in order to express things, we have to use analogies from our experience. But then the analogies are very often we use an expression that is actually self-contradictory, because we want to express something that we have no words for to express. Golu v'yodua is actually self-contradictory. If it is golu, it means it is never hidden. Doesn't have to come into knowing. What we want to say is that he actually knows everything. Yodua, he knows every little detail. But how does he know it? Not because he had to go and study each thing individually and get to know it. He knows it because it's golu. It was never concealed. But we don't say just golu, because we want to express that it's like in know means directly he actually pays attention to everything. But the minute we start saying he pay attention to it, we shouldn't be misinterpret and say, oh, he had to find out about it. No, he never had to find out about it. So this is why we use these two terms simultaneously in one breath to say that he is Yodua by the fact that it's golu. But nevertheless, we add the word Yodua because we mean that he knows everything in detail. But he knows everything in detail in the way of golu. Golu means that he never had to find out. If he never had to find out, that means he never had to touch it. Never had to be nislavish in it.
Why didn't he say opposite? Why didn't they put the words opposite? Why didn't they say...
Because what comes first, my dear friend?
Golu.
V'zehu iker hachayu shel ha'ilams. This, in fact, is the iker hachayu shel ha'ilams. I'm going to try to explain this, and then it's iker hachayu shel ha'ilams. This idea from Das Elyon, idea from Makif. This is what actually gives the world real highs. Everything, all highs in the world, everything that exists in the world, we know Hashem created. And Hashem created it, Hashem creates it. In our experience, when we create something, you make an object, you make this siddur, you write something, you take a piece of paper that exists before you ever wrote on it. You take a pen that existed before you ever wrote with it. You put the piece of paper down on the table before you ever started anything. So now you have a table and a paper and a pen. Way before anything, and then you make your marks on the paper. When you make the marks on the paper, what happened now? This is a combination of all three things in one place. There's the table that supported it. There is the ink that was deposited on a piece of paper. So how does it exist? Even though you are the originator of the whole thing, you created the whole thing, you wrote this whole thought. But how does it exist? Because there is paper and ink and a table. It's a mitzvah. It's not representative. The thought is representative of your thought. But the presence of this writing is not representative of you. It exists because there is ink and paper. Hashem creates the world. The world, the place, and the material, and all that goes into it, does not exist prior to being created. Part of the creation itself is the material from which it was created. One second. Let me just explain to you. If we say that to create, Hashem has to create constantly, because it's Yesh Miyayin. This Yesh Miyayin applies not only to the design of the world, not only to the wisdom that exists in it, but it applies to the very basic presence and existence. Now, if we said, we understand readily, like we said before, if this cedar is held up, something is holding it up. If the world continues to exist and to live and to act, Hashem gives it chayes to exist. Fine. But here we're talking about not just about the chayes and what acts and how the world persists. We are talking about the very present, the very existence itself. Since it doesn't have an existence on its own, that means that its very existence itself is Hashem's existence. Nothing. It doesn't have an existence on its own. The existence of the world itself represents Hashem's presence. Not what it says, not the message and the chokhmah that's in it. The very existence, the very presence of the world represents Hashem's presence. Because without, I didn't get to that. Very simple. Because without Hashem's presence, there's nothing. What? In order to give a message, you have to have a piece of paper and ink. Piece of paper and ink needs Hashem's presence to exist.
I'm saying when the world gives a message, it's not. It gives a message.
No. Hashem, the world gives a message that's a secondary. We're talking about the very existence of the world itself. This is where we come into Das Elyon. Das Tachte and Das Elyon we defined briefly before. Das Tachte means that you know something by examining the object. In other words, the object exists first, and then you give an answer. This is the message. Where is it coming from? What makes it be? Das Elyon means that you know it from its inception. You know it from the place where it's coming from. Not that the object exists. You know only the koyah, the elokee first. And everything represents elokus. Therefore, what is the iker chayes? What makes things present? If you have to know the object first in order to explain what it is, but the object doesn't exist before it's created. So what gives the object its an essential, its initial being? This is the Das Elyon. The Das Elyon, this knowledge that the Rebbe Shem knows the world at Das Elyon level, in Abchinas Makiv, this is what makes the world be. The fact that the world can also be at the lower level, Das Elyon, that the Elokus is hidden, and we have to do avoid and all that's Das stuff. But the very presence, the very existence, that is representative of Das Elyon. Because Das Elyon means that whatever is known is in itself a lakus, not a separate entity. And this is what makes it be. This is what allows it to be, because if it's not a lakus, it cannot be. So one second, so you listen a second. So, when we come back to our analogy, when we come to knowing things by his slaps and say, this is a table. And everything that we come to know, is all known in a certain form. In other words, we don't come to know and saying, oh, there is something here. There is an existence here. That's not how we get to know things. If we identify something, it's because we identify with its function. What is it? If there is no what, then we don't know it. That's on the Islapshus level. Right? Our knowledge is the what it is. Is this a table? Is this a chair? But we don't realize that in order to be a table, or to be a chair, or to be a window, there is materials involved. There is all kinds of different things. We don't relate to that at all. But we relate to it. What is its function? At that level, we can be mislavish. But the very existence, its very existence, we don't relate to at this level. And this is what he says, that the Iker Chaya Shelo Elim is God from Das Eli. Because what? Because in Das Eli, this is where Hashem's presence is really there. And therefore he gives it a real mitzvah. Once it exists, then he can go down and start examining it on a detailed level, on Das Tachten level. Okay, understand a little bit? Yeah. Okay, this will be it for the day.